Brody. I would love it if you didn't knock over the camera. Come here. Come here. Stop rubbing your face on that. Good job, Brody. Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. We're going to be continuing our discussion about Dead Like Me. So this is the final episode of season 1. This is episode 14, Rest in Peace. So this is a really great episode. It's in my top 5 and it is such a good ending for the first season. Ties everything up really nicely. So the plot is that we are on the 1-year anniversary of George's death, which it seems pretty early for her 1-year anniversary. This episode does bring up a few questions as far as the timeline is concerned, because in the next season, it appears to be the first Halloween that Georgia has experienced, but if a year's already gone by, then she would have experienced Halloween in some capacity from the moment that she died to the following year. Even if she died like on Halloween Day, she would have experienced it again the next year. So it does call into question a few things that happened the next season. But anyway, that's just one thing that we won't think about too much. So Georgia is having one of those days, one of those good days. She gets a $20 bill that lands as she's biking along. She gets no reaps for the day because it's her day. Daisy buys her breakfast. However, when she gets to happy time to finally ask for her job back, it's been a couple of days, she finally goes back and Dolores says no. And she gives this long baseball story about why she's not gonna give Millie her job back. Then something bad happens. Dolores gets a phone call that something has happened with Murray, and George kicks into action. She takes Dolores to the vet. That's where the plot continues for them. So along the sidelines, we have Clancy and Joy again quarreling, and there's a lot happening. Clancy's phone is still ringing. We're not entirely sure, based off the narrative, if it's his mother who really wants to go to the cemetery with them later that day, or if this is the affair that he's having. They're not meshing at all. They seem to really be growing apart, and meanwhile, Joy and Reggie are starting to mend their relationship a little bit more. We're seeing a lot more of that. What is hard about this relationship in general is that we have no sympathy for Clancy. He is not a character that can be, I think, redeemed in any way. They tried to give him this glimpse of humanity that we're supposed to care about in the Sunday mornings episode, but he just really is this very cold, distant, emotionally unbothered character, and he ostracized his daughter, who was such a young kid, and just let her kind of do her own thing, and that caused him to neglect his entire family because he just kind of let everything happen along the sidelines and didn't really do his part. So they tried to make him sympathetic. They tried to give us some sympathy towards him, but it just didn't work. And especially with everything going on in the background, it's really hard to find any sense of sympathy for him. There's a foreshadowing moment where Joy is putting on her lipstick and it's this beautiful red color, and she ends up wiping it off, and she seems a lot happier that she's got the makeup off. And this is an interesting visual because it's like she's putting on this face for the world, but it's not who she really wants to be. And once she removes that mask, she's happier. And for our Reaper team, we see Rube go to a yoga class, and he really connects to his Reap. He ends up taking the soul of Mike from Lost, and they have this really interesting bond. And we find that Rube has a soft spot for him. Normally, Rube is really distant from his Reaps. He normally doesn't really seem to care about them. He kind of just does his job. But in this one, he really bonds with this guy. They even go back to Rube's place and they do some more yoga, and Rube really seems to care and feel for this guy. Then we see Daisy and Mason. Mason is really trying to get laid. It's been 15 months. He asked Daisy to help pimp him out, and it does not go well for him at all until he meets this goth girl who's really into the idea that he's a Reaper, and then they bone in the back closet while all the customers are shopping. And this is again a foreshadowing moment of something else that we're going to see in the second season during the Viper episode. We'll get to that later. I find it always really hard to believe that Mason does not have more people that he is boning in his afterlife, because when we saw Mason in the first episode and what he looks like to everybody, the guy was kind of a fox. I mean, maybe the drugs are what's turning people off, but you know, he could get it. So let's take us back to the vet's office. So when they get there, they meet this little boy, and he's sitting there and he has a post-it in his book that he's reading, and this sets off alarms for George, because how many people does she see that have just post-its casually with them? He asks Dolores what her pet's name is, and then George gets even more suspicious. We find out that this kid's name is Charlie. He is a pet reaper, and he is hanging out because he needs to get the soul of a rabbit that's at this vet. There's a lot of questions that are raised up when we meet Charlie, because he's clearly filthy. He doesn't look like he's got a home. His clothes are tattered. When George asks him where he lives, he says here and there. It makes you wonder about the other pieces of this world that we haven't seen yet, that there's kid reapers. These kids have this really big cosmic middle finger given to them because they have to take pets' souls, which has got to be hard for a little kid to not only be connecting with death, but you're also taking the souls of pets. It's very possible that the kid reapers also take other kids' lives. We're not entirely sure, but we do know that Charlie specifically is out for pets. We see him a few times throughout the second season, and it raises some questions like, who's taking care of this kid? Who's his boss? Is it another kid who really just doesn't know what they're doing? It makes you wonder about those deeper implications, and also how many souls do they have to take? Are they going to be kids forever? Would explain why he's not taken care of, because it's not like a kid can go and ask for a job. They can't really do anything that an adult could, and they'll never grow up. So if they find an adult who can take care of them, after a few years, it's going to be pretty obvious that they didn't age. So there are a lot of questions raised that maybe we can get into another time. So Murray, we meet him for the first time. He's this cute little fluffer chunker boy, and he's this really pretty gunmetal gray, and he's totally fine. Just he's getting to a certain age, and Dolores needs to start kind of thinking about what's gonna happen next, because all she has is Murray and happy time. At the end of this little saga, she ends up giving Millie her job back, which is kind of messed up because Dolores wasn't gonna give her job back, and then Millie did something nice for her, and then she was like, just kidding, you can have your job back. Like, I love Dolores with all my heart. I think she's one of the most fabulous characters ever written. But it is kind of messed up that she only gave Millie her job back because they mended their friendship, which is, you know, it is what it is. And then we end season 1 in a graveyard, much like the ending of season 2, where that also ends in a graveyard. So the last family goes and they have their little moment at George's tombstone, or at her headstone. It's finally gotten delivered a year later, and Joy says some words, Reggie says some words, Clancy kind of just walks off with the priest and doesn't stick around for the words that are said to George, which again doesn't really give us much sympathy towards him as a character. It just kind of makes us not like him more. Like, why did he need to walk off and go talk to this priest? Was he maybe confessing that he's been having an affair and he doesn't know what to do with his life? Like, what is it that he had to do that was so important that he couldn't stick around with his wife and his daughter to hear their final words to his dead daughter? So they give their words and they leave, and that's when the Reapers come in. They pay their respects to George's grave, and they have some champagne, they share a few words, and Rube says this really beautiful speech to George about, you know, them toasting all the people that she'll never get to meet, all the experiences she'll never get to have, but she's got this life and she's loved, and that's really sweet. And in the previous scene where the last family was there, we have a really sweet moment with Joy where she confesses that she's sorry for all the hurtful things that she did, and she's sorry for not being a better mom, and that she wished that she had done things a little bit differently because she did truly love her. And so there's a lot of mending that's happening in this episode. We see a softer side to all these characters, which is great because we usually see this kind of grittier side to them, this funny, gritty side. And it's nice to see that soft heart to all of them. This is just a really great episode. There's a point where Mason says to George, "Dead like us." And I love when shows can kind of cleverly drop the title or parts of the title in, and we'll see a line very similar in the end of season 2. And I enjoy the wrap-up of this one. I think it makes for a really good ending to the season, and it feels complete. My favorite quote from this episode is very early in the episode where George is ordering her breakfast. She asks that her bacon be extra, extra, extra crispy because that's how Rube likes it. And Roxy says to her, "What are you, Rube's new butt boy?" And George replies really quickly, "Why? Did you resign?" This is a point where George is really starting to just blossom, and she's becoming her own person. She's not caring about what other people think. She's just doing her. And we've come to this really strong point where George is this fully realized human being now. She's not taking anybody's mess, and she's living authentically her, and I love that. Thank you so much for watching this episode, and thanks for keeping up this whole season with me. I'm gonna be starting on season 2. I'll see you guys then. Bye.